All right, so let's see. My name is Kiki Adams, and this is my colleague, Shayna Gardiner. We both come out of formal training in computational linguistics, and we work at a tech startup based in Toronto, Canada, called Receptiviti. And we work with primarily with a program called Language Inquiry and Word Count, or LUC, which some of you may be familiar with, especially in conjunction with the work of James Pennebaker, who I worked with for many years before moving up to Canada. So I'm going to jump right in. The language inquiry and word count system is based on function words. Many of you, if you are practitioners of natural language processing, may know them as stopwords and may mostly be familiar with just throwing them out as the first step in pre-processing. For many natural language processing techniques, they kind of get in the way, right? They're extremely frequent. They are these little words in orange that are not nouns, verbs, or adjectives. They're the things that glue those words together, kind of the types of words that you may remember from English class as prepositions, pronouns, conjunctions, all of those. Now, part of what's so unique about them is how high frequency they are. Some of you may be familiar with the zip distribution. So the most frequent words in the English language, and this holds true in every language actually, would be farthest to your left on the y-axis, and then the drop-off in terms of overall frequency of use is incredibly steep. The function words such as, and, about, make up less than 0.04% of all of the words that we know, but over half of the words that we actually use, which makes them quite unique in terms of distribution for dealing with in natural language processing. Shown another way, definitely just an excuse to use a Ziphosaurus rex in a presentation. Actually, there is another important point here, though, which is that the most common function words, basically the top 10 of all function words, these include a, and, the, and, but, are even much higher frequency than the rest of the function words. And then content words, which is what we call nouns, verbs, and adjectives, anything that's not function words, are much less frequent. So what else is important about function words? Why do we use them in such a different way than we use content words? To answer that question, we kind of have to dive into some neuroscience. When I say the word table, a lot of you have a mental image of a table that pops up. That is thanks to the Wernicke's area, shown in gray there. And the Wernicke's area stores images associated with words, sociocultural connections, memories, emotional connections. If I say the word love, all of the associations that you have with the word love are stored in that Wernicke's area. Now, how to actually put those words in a sentence is what's stored in the Broca's area, at the other arrow in what, pinkish, an odd pinkish color. And so the difference between I loved that table and I tabled that love is thanks to the Broca's area. Now, when you're actually speaking, it's the Wernicke's area that you're consciously aware of, right? So if you're talking about a table, you're not thinking about how to put that word in a sentence correctly. You're thinking about the table. The Broca's area is always working as you process language, either hearing it, speaking, reading, writing, all of those, but it's very subconscious. Now, what's kind of most important here is that function words don't really have much of a representation in the Wernicke's area. They're pretty much primarily stored in the Broca's area. So there's kind of a much less space taken up in the brain by words like a and about. Because, when I say the word and, you don't have an image or emotional connections that come up when I say that. And so their processing is extremely subconscious, about as subconscious as eye movements, unless you're, going out of your way to be aware of them.
So, why are function words important to us? So as Kiki mentioned, they are really high frequency. You saw on the zip distribution, they're some of the most common words that we use. Our proportion of words in any given text sample or subset of speech that we have, it's all going to be function words. Well, a lot of it is. So that means they're reliably present in language in large numbers, and that gives us a really strong signal to work with, because such a huge proportion of our text sample is function words. And Kiki also mentioned that they're subconscious. This isn't the kind of subconscious like when you go to sleep and your dreams represent your subconscious, no. It's more like eye movements. And that means that they're extremely difficult to manipulate. So the way that you think about the words that you say when you're giving a speech, for example, you're going to focus more on the content words. Should I use this noun to describe this group of people or this other noun? How are they going to react to my choice of this noun? You're going to do the same with verbs and adjectives, but you're not going to think about which articles you're using. Am I going to say this paper or that paper? You're just going to do it, and you're going to do it without thinking. Because you don't think about it, it reveals a lot about your underlying psychological state, which is really useful for us. Another important thing about function words is that they're relational. What that means is that it expresses a relationship between yourself and the world around you, objects and concepts in that world and how they're interacting with each other, and how you view those interactions, just everything to do with your surroundings and relationships between things. Prepositions, for example, this is a gift for my friend. You're expressing that the gift is going to your friend. That's the relationship between the gift and your friend. So let's use a more specific example. This is the text that Kiki had up earlier. It's actually from Reddit. We do a lot of work with Reddit data. This is from the subreddit for the TV show BoJack Horseman. So that's what BoJack is up there. But let's focus on that last part. Had flashbacks to BoJack studying that slide. Why did she use that instead of this or the? There's a lot of reasons that she's probably not consciously thinking about. But let's think about the use of that, how we would normally involve it in our sentences. When we use this or that, it implies some sort of spatial relationship. So this is something that's closer to us, whereas that is something that's farther away. It started out as being physically close versus physically far, but we use it for metaphorically close versus metaphorically far as well. So when she's saying that slide, she's distancing herself from the slide. If she used this slide, it would be the slide that is metaphorically closer to her, presumably not physically in this case. On the other hand, using the puts it completely into a different space from where she is, because she's not talking about any sort of relationship that she has with that slide. There's no thinking about where it is in terms of her metaphorical space. So the completely removes her from the space where the slide is, metaphorically, of course. To recap, when do we use function words? When we want to understand how a person sees themselves in relation to the people and the world around them, or how they see relationships between objects, concepts, or people in the world around them. So how you're thinking about yourself in relation to the world, how you're thinking about other people as they interact with each other in the world, or how you're thinking about your relationships with them. Another important caveat here is that we can also use function words when we want to model behavior or events that may be related to the above. So if we want to model behavior that's related to how someone sees themselves in the world, or their relationship to the world, or other people's relationships in the world, we can use function words. So a good example of that we've had success with recently is authenticity. So when a person is using distancing language, so that pronoun, or even better, the pronoun, or article, sorry, even better than the article, they're removing themselves from the space or distancing themselves from the space of the thing that they're talking about. And that indicates that someone is being very guarded and trying to present a very specific, polished image to you. Often, the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to deceive you. So that's something very useful for us, especially in today's climate. So let's go back to this piece of text. When would we use her function words? Well, we would use them when we're trying to understand her relationship to the material that she's talking about. In this case, it's going to be her relationship to her psychology studies, not how much she likes BoJack Horseman. She's talking about studying for a psychology test, one of the sections, that slide. So in this case, we would use it to understand how she relates to her studies. If we wanted to see how much she likes BoJack Horseman or talks about BoJack Horseman, that would be a job for topic modeling or sentiment analysis. So we've gone through the when and the why, and now let's get to the how. How do we pay attention to function words? So normally linguists divide them into these categories, so I recommend dividing them that way as well, being a linguist. So we've got pronouns, articles, prepositions, auxiliary verbs, functional adverbs, conjunctions, and negations. Pronouns can be further divided, we'll get to that in a second. But an example of a pronoun is the very first word in this piece of text, I'm. The I is the first person singular pronoun. Auxiliary verbs are your next one. The apostrophe M is short for M. That's the be auxiliary. It's modifying the other verb, studying. That's how we know it's an auxiliary verb. Articles, there's lots of examples. Cognitive psychology test, the sections. Prepositions, we have a lot. Studying for, one of. Sections is about. We went through auxiliary verbs. Functional adverbs, there aren't any in this piece of text, but that's going to be things like always. Conjunctions, and an or, and negations, there's a good one there, never. Another really common one is not. So there's lots of ways that you can further subdivide these categories to get a really detailed approach. This is just one example. We call it our pronoun breakdown, and that is just the pronouns. So that's the personal and impersonal pronouns divided into as much detail as you can get them. This gives us a really fine-grained understanding of how people are using the pronouns specifically, but we can do the same with the other sets of function words as well.